for it. And thank you, Dr. Wainman. That was a great speech. Beautiful answers. I enjoyed every second of it. I think everybody agrees. Okay, so now we'll move on to our next part of the symposium, which is going to be learning about anatomy research and getting some insight into that specific area of research. That knowledge will be bestowed upon us by Endra Woods and Claudie Lecage. I'm sorry if I butchered that. So Claudia and Indra, please take the virtual stand. The mic is all yours.
All right, I'm just trying to take over here. So hopefully everyone can hear me.
Yes, we can. You're good.
All right.
I'd like to
Indra, are you on as well?
I'm on. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. So I guess we'll start off with a little bit about ourselves. So basically, both of us are two students who are researching with the anatomy team. We're focusing on the anatomy volunteer lab. So basically, I'll introduce myself first. My name is Claudie Lecage. Cloudy like the weather. And I'm a fifth-year medical sciences student. And basically, I'm hoping to get into medical school and eventually become a doctor. So those are my future goals at the moment.
All right. Thank you, Claudie. My name is Indra. I'm a fourth-year kinesiology student, and I am really interested in a career in education. So I thought this was a really great opportunity to get involved in the anatomy volunteer program and with this research project.
All right, so now we're going to kind of tell you guys a little bit about how we both got involved in this research study. So basically, for myself, I decided I'm coming back for a fifth year, had to take some prerequisites. So coming back for another year, and I kind of wanted a little more of a hands-on experience, kind of get more impactful work instead of just going to lectures. I kind of wanted more of an experience overall. So I decided to start reaching out. And one of the professors I was reaching out to was Dr. Dragon. So I emailed him, I introduced myself, and basically I told him, this is what I'm interested in. Do you have any opportunities for me? I'd be interested working under you. And basically when I sent this email the first time around, it was right when COVID was happening. So the response wasn't probably what you guys were expecting. It was kind of like pandemic kind of just started. And as of right now, labs are closing. We're not really sure what's going on. So at the moment, there are no opportunities available. So I was like, oh man, all right, well, got to start looking somewhere else. Literally like 2 weeks later, Dr. Dragon slides back in my inbox and he's like, hey, like, are you still interested in like researching with us? He's like, we're moving everything online. We got this amazing opportunity to do research focusing on our anatomy volunteer lab. And I was like, sign me up. So that's how I got started with this whole project.
Thank you for sharing that. On my part, I am a transfer student at Brock as well. So when I transferred to Brock and took the anatomy courses, I really loved it. I got really invested, and I ended up becoming a volunteer in the lab for about 3 semesters right before COVID hit as well. So in entering my fourth year, I was looking at potential research projects to do, and I reached out to one of my professors, Dr. Baudette, to see if I could get involved in the anatomy lab and performing some kind of special studies there. So I came across the opportunity to take the course code called KINI 4P99 and write a literature review for this project.
Yeah, just to kind of add in, like, as you can see, we're both 2 different students coming from 2 different programs. She's coming from Ken, I'm coming from MedSci. We reached 2 different supervisors. I reached Dr. Dragon, she reached Dr. Baudette, and even besides all those differences, we both ended up working together on the same project. And I find that our different backgrounds throughout our research has really complemented well with each other. So that's kind of why we would both kind of advise everyone to don't hesitate to reach out. Don't be afraid to get involved, because if we hadn't done that, we would have missed out on this great opportunity here at Brock.
Absolutely. You never know until you try. So as for the project goals, with this project specifically, we worked with the research team to gain insight on their hypothesis, which was to explore the impact of the anatomy volunteer program that we currently have at Brock on the perceptions and the anatomical knowledge of post-secondary students and graduates. So to further break this down, we split it into two parts. We looked at the benefit that the program has on the students participating in the lab, and the benefits to the volunteers stepping in and helping the students themselves.
All right, and now basically with any good study, you have to make sure that there's a reason behind that study, and that study that you're doing, its results are actually important. Otherwise, you're just gonna kind of be wasting your time and wasting resources that could have went to a more impactful study. So you really wanna make sure your study is important. So basically for this study, we found that it's really important as it provides both opportunities to the anatomy volunteers themselves and the students that they are teaching, because they can both improve academically and it helps both their career paths. Another thing was that based off of like the feedback and responses that we get from our previous volunteers and previous students, it helps us further develop and refine the program so that we can further benefit our students and make it as beneficial as possible and make sure we are properly using all of our resources. And then the last reason was kind of something that we didn't initially think of. It kind of came up while we're doing our research that there happens to be a real gap in the literature focusing on the actual volunteers themselves. As a lot of the studies, Indra similarly found that while we're looking for our articles, we noticed that a lot of the studies focus on the students and the impact that the volunteer had on the students, but there wasn't really studies mainly focusing on the actual volunteer themselves and the benefits that they were getting. Majority of the ones that mentioned the volunteers was kind of just like at the end, they kind of just threw it in there like these could be potential benefits, but with no real significant investigation. So that kind of really made our study stand out compared to other ones. So now we have like our hypothesis that kind of gets you started on the whole thing. So you kind of need like your main question and your goal that you're going with. So for mine, on the left there in the blue, I was basically looking at the impact that peer volunteering had on both the students and the volunteer themselves.
Yes, and on my half of the research project, I looked at the impact of having the peer leaders present in the learning environment on the students participating in the class and their attitudes and successes in the course. So we did want to discuss our experience in writing the literature review. So we decided to break this up into 3 phases as we felt that our experience had entailed. So at the beginning, we started in the research phase where we started to collect articles and started to look at the key terms that were important to each. So looking at a lab volunteer, sorry, that should be what it says on the slide, versus a peer leader. So there were some differences in the terms, like for example, the term lab volunteer didn't give us exactly what we were looking for. We were looking for a peer leader, which is better defined as an upper year student who had previously completed the course with a sufficient grade, and sufficient grade had different criteria based on the institution that they were in. And they had also had to apply and consent to participating in the lab. And so that moves on. So once we defined those terms, we started to read and interpret the articles that we looked up. So an important question to ask when looking at those articles was, is it useful? This was a good learning experience because some of the articles may have had very good titles where you look at it and you say, yes, this is exactly what I'm looking for. And then you look at how they define the terms of the volunteers and you go, oh, that isn't exactly what I'm looking for. So that could be a disappointing moment, but at the same time, that could also help you reinforce what you're looking for. And then in the planning phase, what we did is we compiled the articles we read and found, and we created a table to organize the important key points that we needed for our literature review. And then based on this, we also worked with our professors, our supervisors, to help plan subheadings and plan out the structure of our literature review.
All right, so now once you have your hypothesis and goals, your research done, and your planning done, now you can finally get cracking and actually start writing your literature review. So basically the first thing that we had to make sure that what we were doing while we were writing was that we were actually following our planning phase. So we want to make sure that it was flowing good, that we had our structure properly placed as we had planned it. Once we're done writing, we want to make sure we review the paper multiple times for grammar mistakes or any kind of mistakes or any changes we might want to make, or if we've come across any new information during the writing process that we might want to add that we find expands on the literature, we can add that in our review stages. And lastly, while we're reviewing, like Indra said, we could go to our supervisors, get feedback and advice, have them read certain passages, paragraphs of our paper and get feedback from them as well. So here, I'm not sure how good it looks on your guys' screen. Here we included our tables, our planning tables, which we created. So I'll let Indra go first.
Absolutely. So on the right hand of your screen is a sample of the table that I included in my literature review paper. As you can see, I have 4 different columns. I have the authors, I have the title of the paper, the key points from the methods, and the main findings. And as you can see, compared to Claudia's, I have one less category, and mine tended to be a little wordier than his. So perhaps in the future, if I were to do something like this again, that's something I would like to improve on.
So I guess before I even start off, you guys can clearly see that we're both kind of working on the same project, but we've kind of taken different approaches, and even like our planning, like we had similar planning, but we came out with like different results. We both created different tables. So for my table, I had an author section. So this I just put the authors and the years. This let me quickly find my articles when I went back to the table. Next, I had the location. This is something that you might not need to include, but I was also interested in seeing if the volunteer impact was influenced by geographic location, because there could be different views of volunteers. So I thought that'd be important to add in there as well, just to kind of see if there's any trends popping up as I'm making the table. And then next, I included the study design and the sample. So that basically kind of covers a nice little summary of my method section, so I can quickly refer to what the studies were, what the sample population that they were looking at was. And then finally, I added key findings, which is basically like 1 or 2 lines of what basically the overall conclusions of that study were. And kind of the great thing of our tables was that these started off as planning tables, but we actually were able to actually incorporate these in our actual literature review as actual tables in our paper. So that kind of worked out great, where planning actually got incorporated as well.
Absolutely. So we did.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. So I was going to add that we did want to go over briefly the results that we found from our literature review. So I analyzed 13 studies in total. I had found that 11 studies showed a net benefit for having peer leaders present on the students' attitudes and success. I found 2 studies that either had a neutral or non-significant impact, and I had found no studies that showed any negative effects on student attitudes and performance.
So from my paper, my results basically were, the first one is that the peer-led students performed a lot better academically than students who were not taught by a peer. So basically, when these volunteers are introduced and are interacting with students and are helping them, these students tend to perform better than when they don't have that interaction, that experience, and that resource. Next was something about the actual volunteers themselves. In general, when you are a volunteer, you actually have close to 30% better chances of getting employed. So just by having that experience on your CV greatly increases your chances of further career advancements. And another result was basically that these peer volunteers, they felt a lot more confident with their skills. They were able to create new skills in terms of teaching, communication, and they're even able to build on their previously developed skills and further refine those skills as well. And they even perform better academically themselves as well, because in preparing for teaching with their students, they actually learned new methods to teach themselves material as well. So they ended up performing a lot better academically.
Absolutely. So thank you, Claudia, for that. Now we would like to discuss what we learned from this literature review experience. So one of the key points we'd like to discuss is to keep an open mind. So as we had mentioned before with the key terms, the term that we mainly use in the lab for our volunteers is student volunteer. However, in looking at the literature, student volunteer was defined as a student who stepped up to volunteer for a task in the lab. And that didn't fit our research criteria. So, however, in looking at those articles with the term student volunteer, I came across the term peer leader, which, as I had defined before, was a much better fit to what we were looking for. So in trying to keep an open mind for the terms that we use and the terms that are available in the literature is very important to success in writing the literature review. And we'd also like to remind you to keep an open mind in the results of what you may find. It's best to go into looking at the literature without any preconceived notions of what the outcome might be. So if you have a bias towards one outcome or the other, it won't give you a fair evaluation of what is out there in the literature. So going out there just to look at what's there is the best way to approach things. Yes, and again, we had also talked about learning the terms for the literature review. So, Claudia, if you want to discuss the ethics,
so
research
just
ethics board.
Kind of add in as well, like keeping an open mind also relates to keeping an open mind to trends. So we might notice other trends while we're doing our research that may not be directly related to what we're exactly looking at, but they could have been trends that kind of expand our literature. So it's not something you want to disregard right away. And like also with terms, we also came across terms as near peer teaching and reciprocal peer teaching, which if we originally seen that in a header with a header or title of an article without being aware of what those mean, we would have completely disregarded those articles. But in fact, for example, near peer teaching, that's when you kind of have a superior kind of, so it'd be like a senior year student or a graduate student being like the peer teacher of the first year or second year student. And the other one was reciprocal peer teaching, was when you have two students and they're kind of alternating their roles as student and peer teacher. So those were two things that weren't, that we really wouldn't have noticed if we didn't come across them and actually investigate what they meant and what their true meanings were. So another great experience that we got out of this was actually going through like the ethics of the study. So before we actually got to do any, before we actually got to collect any data or anything like that, we had to go through the ethics board at BrockU. So basically we had to go through this long document where it's basically just breaking down our whole project. And really this also helped us come up with new ideas. They also created challenges that we had to overcome. And the thing is great because you're also ensuring that that like your true benefits can actually be shown and that you're not causing any harm to patients. Any data you're collected, you're making sure all of it's being kept confident. And then once you send out the first document to the ethics board, they kind of get back to you. They give you feedback on some of your input. So they might give you responses on stuff that you have to change, or they might ask for further explanation on some of your methods, which you have to go on and further explain and give responses to. And this kind of just like further puts you into your study and understanding your own study, where you know exactly what you're doing now, you know the exact changes and why you're doing every single thing, and not just being like, oh, like this is a good idea. Like, you know the exact reason why that's good. And now we're kind of looking at future endeavors. So this is basically like what's to come in our project. So we had previously submitted, our team previously submitted an abstract to the American Association for Anatomy and Experimental Biology, which actually ended up getting accepted and published, and now they have invited us to present our project at a conference at the end of the month. So this might look really familiar. If you remember back to Dr. Wayman's presentation, like these came up a lot. Like these are a big deal conference. Unfortunately, ours don't get to be in Orlando. We get them on MS Teams, but hopefully the weather here will be just as good. So, but yeah, it was a great opportunity for us, and we really appreciate it, and we look forward to what's to come with the project.
Absolutely. So we'd like to thank the presenters for giving us the opportunity to present our experiences today, and we would like to now open the floor to questions that anyone may have.
Yes, thank you, Cloudy and Indra. If you guys, any of the participants, if you guys have any questions, I know you don't have access to the general chat that we have for the meeting, but you can send me a direct message and I can read the question out loud, or you can send it directly to Indra or Cloudy if you want. While we wait for other questions to come in, I already have two questions. The first one is, what is one thing you guys wished you knew before you got into research? Or before you started your research?
So I guess one thing before would just kind of be like having more like the actual research experience. Like when we started this, for me, it originally started as a directed reading, right? So I had to write a literature review. So that was also kind of something new to me. It was like my first time writing a literature review. So really we had to kind of get a lot of support from our supervisors, like giving us suggestions, kind of explaining everything to us. So I guess having more experience in writing papers, dealing with articles, how to notice themes and stuff like that better is really important. So I guess having those skills ahead of time would have been better.
I think that goes back to what Dr. Wayman said, though. You don't know this stuff before you get into research. You have to learn it. So that's good that you know now. Indra, do you want to add anything?
Yes, please. So one thing I would have loved to know before going into the research process is just the sheer amount of time and patience you need to have throughout the process. Like, as Claudia had mentioned in the presentation, the research ethics board process it takes quite a long time. It's very tedious and you don't get a response right away. And even when you do get the response, they may not accept it right away and recommend changes that you need to make first. So as well as going through and reading all the articles, that takes lots of time. And it really was a semester-long project. So it's something I would love to pass on to students looking to do something like this in the future, that yes, it is a big commitment, but you can definitely learn a lot from this process.
Thank you. That was great. Okay, and I have another question as well. Did you guys, well, it's kind of like a two-part question. So first, did you guys submit one paper or was it two papers that you both submitted or published?
So basically me and Indra had two separate courses. So I was doing this as a directed reading and she was doing it as a KIN 4P99 course. So that we did that for one semester, but continued with the project. And basically both of us wrote our separate literature reviews based off of the aims that we presented at the beginning of the presentation. But so as a group, though, we put together an abstract and submitted that to the American Anatomy Association EB.
Okay. So I think it will, like the second part of the student's question would relate to this abstract part kind of thing. They are curious how you guys wrote it cohesively together, because it would not be the same as like group projects, you know, where you have to like separate parts where each person would be working on a part. So the person is asking, how did you guys collaborate on this to make one cohesive end product kind of thing?
So basically what like our group would do, we had meetings, they'd vary between weekly or bi-weekly. So we'd always be in communication with each other. And whenever we had to work on, say, a document together, so something like that, or like the ethics board where it's one document, all of us kind of go in together. Basically, we would kind of get like the first crack at it. and then our supervisors would come in. So Dr. McPherson, Dr. Dragon, Dr. Mezzo, and Dr. Baudet, they would kind of come in and they'd kind of review it, make their changes. And then once all of us have kind of given our input, contributed to it, we'd all go schedule a meeting, we'd all go through it together to make sure that we're all happy with the final products that we came out with before we submit anything.
That's great. That sounds like a positive work environment. Indra, did you want to add anything to that?
Unfortunately, I don't have much to add since Claudia did hit all the bases there. But yeah, it was a good work environment. Our professors were very patient and understanding with us, which was definitely helpful in this process. So thanks to them for that. And yeah, it was fun.
That's awesome. I have not received any more questions, so I think we will end it here. Thank you so much, you guys, for giving us this information about your research. I wish you all best of luck in your future endeavors, and I'll pass it on to Chelsea, who is going to take over for the next part.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
All right, so next off, we're going to have some current anatomy students share their experiences about the course being online, and then that will be followed again by another Q&A period. So first, we have Rebecca Thompson, and she is a current MSK student. So I'll open up the floor to her now.
Hi, everyone. So my name's Rebecca. I'm in my 4th year of my public health undergraduate degree, and I'm currently in MSK Anatomy. I just wanted to talk about some of my experiences that I've had so far in MSK Anatomy. So as a student looking to an online semester, it's kind of intimidating to think about the fact that we're learning anatomy so away from the physical environment that you normally would expect. So looking at it as an online platform, it is intimidating, but I wanted to talk about some of the advantages that I think that we've had the opportunity to have access to thus far this semester. So I think something very, very useful for us is the fact that we've had access constantly to visuals. So using visible bodies has been great for us, I think. So whenever you're learning and watching through different lectures, you can actually pause and then go over to visible bodies and see actually what they're talking about. So it's kind of one sort of thing to hear someone say, like, as the muscle contracts, this is what happens. But it's so different to actually see it. So we've had that opportunity, which is so much different than what other students in previous years would have had. And we have it constantly. So it's like 24/7. So you can watch your lectures as you want to and still have access as you want to. And then kind of going on to what Dr. Wainman said previously, this is one barrier that I saw is that we have had access to visible bodies and so many animations, which has been great. But I found it a little bit challenging when we were faced with those real anatomical and real specimens. So looking at the visualizations versus the actual specimens and dissections, I found was a little bit shocking just in how different they were and actually locating what it looks like from a color-coded or highlighted structure versus the real structure. But overall, I think that the way this course has been conducted with this changing and unpredictable time has been really great. And I think there is a huge benefit to the student. So that's really just been my experience. And I'm very pleased with the way it has been conducted and wanted to say thank you for all the background that has been going on behind the scenes that we were kind of introduced to at the beginning of this. So just from a student's perspective, thank you so much.
Thanks, Rebecca, for sharing. Okay, so next up we have Emily Hughes. She's a current systems anatomy student.
Hi. Oh. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the lab portion that I'm involved in. Right now, my TA is Kelsey Larkin, and I just found I just want to speak about her for a little bit. She's been very helpful with my experience in the lab section that she runs every week. Any questions that I have about it, I'd reach out to her first, of course, and it's always a quick response, really informative, and really great. In terms of the lecture portion, I think Dr. McPherson has really adapted well to what she puts out for content, because of course it is really difficult not having the hands-on experience that kinesiology really is supposed to be about. But I do think that it's just adapted very well for this online format. And hopefully next year we'll be able to get some more hands-on experience. But yeah, not much for me, but thank you.
Thanks, Emily, for sharing. And last but not least, we have Luke Bagshaw, who is a current systems anatomy student as well.
Hi, my name is Luke Bagshaw. I'm in my first year at Brock, and coming into the class, I'd actually never taken a kin class in my life. I didn't do any in high school, so it was kind of new to me. But online kin, it was like all the, like Rebecca said, like the visible ball. The time you can see how it works and what it's actually like as if you're in class. So that was a really good helpful thing, because with online it's hard to learn how the muscles move and stuff. And then for the lessons with the professor, I find a lot of my other classes it's hard to navigate Sakai and get all my lessons, but with this class they had lessons planned, and it was like unit 1, 2, 3, like it was really planned out and organized, which was much easier to find and less stressful, because sometimes it's hard finding stuff on Sakai. And then just talk about the interactions. Like it's hard to make connections through these classes that we're on, but for the labs especially, like my TA was always there to help. And like I remember we had a lab exam and I had to ask a last minute question, and she came on at like 11 o'clock at night just to like help me out, which was like crazy, right? Because not a lot of TAs would do that. And that's what I really liked about the kin, is the professors and TAs are always there for you whenever you need it. But that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thanks, Luke, for sharing. Thank you, everyone. So now we're going to open up the floor to any questions. So if anyone has any questions, if the chat function is still not working, you can message myself, Miriam, or Mustafa, and we will get to those questions. If nobody has a question right now, I actually have one. This can go to any one of you guys. I just wanted to ask, having spent 1 year online now doing school, if next year were to be online again, what is something you'd like to change, or what is something you would like to see go differently in your classes?
That's a sorry, go ahead, Emily.
No, it's okay. You go.
Okay, thank you. So one thing I think that could change is just the emphasis placed on participating in any lab sections. So I think there is a huge benefit from participating in lab sections, and I know that some of the ones I've had experience with are maybe just lower participation than other classes I've previously had. So I think if there was more weighing on that, it would build a better student community within this virtual setting. So I think it was optional for our course this semester. So giving students the opportunity to work with each other as they previously would have is kind of limited now. So having that opportunity, I think, could be a benefit.
Yeah, I really agree with what Rebecca said. Personally, I would like to see kind of like, I know it's been like discussed before, but like hybrid learning, so like in class and online. Because personally for me, I find if I can go over lecture material on my own time, pause, go back to things that I want to like go over more than in class, if it was just like one go and that's it. I find it like a lot more helpful to really like digest what is being presented.
Okay, so it looks like we have one more question. I've got one in the chat here. Do you think there are any online resources you plan to keep using when school goes back to in person?
I can talk on that. I would say that like obviously we're gonna have models and stuff, I assume, when we go back to in person, but like visible body has been like huge this year, and I think that would still be good for like studying, like if you're not when you're not on campus, like at your house or something, and you still want to play with the models online. I think that'd be a great resource that I would probably keep using through my years.
Absolutely. I agree with Luke. One other thing, I think that the online virtual textbooks are great. It makes it so much easier and accessible. And also, whenever there is an online textbook, there's also an app. So I find that really helpful as well, especially in the days leading up to any exams. Or even just if you have like a quick question about the lecture that you're learning, you can quickly go on your phone and like type in that structure that you're thinking of, and it'll give you that like exact reference right then and there. So I think that's really great as well.
Yeah, I agree with both Luke and Rebecca. Like Visible Body and the online textbook, they're just great resources to have, especially online.
Okay, so I actually got 2 more questions in the chat. So how did they deal with managing their time with all the other classes and the course load of systems anatomy, and how did they take care of themselves at the same time?
Personally, I keep a calendar like just on my wall by my door, and it has like all of my classes, and I kind of like plan out my week to make sure that I have time to like dedicate to each course specifically. And like part of taking care of myself, I usually keep my nights to myself. Like I won't do like notes or assignments or whatever past like I give myself 8 o'clock so that I can have like that time to just kind of like sit down and relax and hopefully get a good night rest.
Okay.
I wasn't in MSK or systems anatomy, but I was in MSK. I think that one of the most important ways to try to take on that task is just realizing what's important and what needs to be done first. So just prioritizing your deadlines for when everything's due. So personally, I had an early lab. So my lab was Tuesday, so I had to make sure that my lectures were done prior to Tuesday, and they released, I think, Friday night. So just allotting time during that period to make sure that that was done was my biggest, I guess, advantage to how I attempted to do that.
Okay, so I have one more question here. Do you feel that your learning has been affected being completely online? And do you think the quality of the course has been compromised?
I was actually waiting to the end to ask the professors what their opinions on this was. I honestly think that no, there hasn't been very much compromising in our learning. I think that because of all the resources that we have had access to, we've had about the same. I think that the only thing that I see as compromise is that we didn't have that physical learning experience in cadaver labs. But I think that with the situation we had, we made the best of it. And I think that I don't see myself as behind peers who would have done it in years before. I think that we know more of the intricacies of what each component of whatever we were learning does. It just might be locating it on an actual specimen that might be the challenge to us in the coming years.
I personally feel like it kind of did have an impact on my learning. Like personally, I'm a very hands-on learner, so I feel like if I were to be in a lab with like cadavers and like looking at real specimens, it would be a lot more helpful to really understand what it is I'm learning. And just like Luke, I've never taken a kinesiology course, like it was never offered in high school. So this is like the year that I'm building like the fundamental understanding of anatomy. And I do feel like online is a bit difficult just because it's not as in depth as it would be with like real cadaver labs.
Okay, so I believe that's it. So I will pass it on to Mustafa now to go over the last section of today's event.
Thank you, Chelsea, and thank the current anatomy students. So now I'll be leaving it to the Brock Anatomy team to talk about the future of anatomy at Brock University.
Okay, everyone, this has been fantastic so far, and thank you, Mustafa, for the intro, and Rebecca, Emily, and Luke. Those were great testimonials, and I think a really nice segue into the final part of our symposium today. So I guess with this, again, this is all about future directions and kind of sharing with you all how much we've learned over the past year now, over a year, and kind of where we hope to go as we move forward with anatomy at Brock. Okay, so I think this got jumbled around a little bit. So Becca, I'll let you chime in on the research end. But the first thing that we want to figure out as a group is trying to explore our new normal. I think before we transitioned everything online, we were pretty naive to what online learning kind of represented and how we could leverage it to the best of our ability. So you're all likely familiar with the fact that we've now inundated you guys and sent you guys a ton of questionnaires to provide us with as much information as possible. So with that, I'm going to use this slide to walk you through some of the interesting information that we've pulled out of the questionnaires now. So one element that we have on the left-hand side of this slide, it's a graph that we actually pulled from an article inside Higher Education. And it was kind of looking at student preferences and opinions after a year of online learning. And this is across a wide range of different disciplines. But one of the biggest things, the bar on the top, the gray bar, is the student preference and appreciation to accessing the content on demand. This is definitely not something that we would typically have in a human anatomy style course. You would typically go into your lecture, go into your lab, and then you would be kind of tuned out from those resources after you left. So just like Rebecca, Luke, and Emily were saying, like having access to visible body and having access to the lectures, I think a lot of students really appreciate, and that's something that we've come to realize as well. The remaining graphs on the right-hand side of this slide, they're all talking to some of the information that we gathered from you guys, so from our students. So you can see question number 8 there. We're asking when you are all watching the content. And this is just for the lectures. So normally we would have one lecture and it would be scheduled wherever in the week the university could optimize that schedule. It might be on Monday, might be on Tuesday, it might be on Friday. But it's interesting to see that we have students that are interacting with the material on multiple days of the week, Sunday through Saturday, and even some interacting with the material on an other day, which I don't know how that got included, but anyways, kudos to those of you interacting with the material on another day of the week. You can see question number 5 too, to the top right-hand side of the slide. So these are the different elements that we've pulled in and implemented in the course. So announcements, calendars, week-by-week lectures, embedded videos, just everything that we've tried to pull in. And again, a pretty uniform distribution of who's using what element. So all of these different online elements seem to be used in some form or fashion. And then with the last part, question number 29, the pie graph on the bottom of the slide, this is us asking you what your preferences are as to which third-party software was most beneficial to your learning. And we included Sakai, Mastering EMP, Visible Body, and other, because we acknowledge that there's a plethora of anatomical resources out there. And again, it's fairly even, like a lot of people interacting through Sakai, Visible Body is another big one, Mastering EMP too. So it's really nice to see that there is a wide range of use to all of the different softwares that we implemented. Okay, so we gathered these data for a purpose, and we're extremely happy that everybody's kind of provided us with these opinions. But I think the big question for us now is what's next? Like, what is the new normal of Brock University Human Anatomy? So I think the biggest and most obvious one, kind of goes without saying, is getting back into the anatomy lab. We, again, through our collaboration with McMaster and with Dr. Wainman, we have access to the cadaver lab, which has been fantastic. So we're really looking forward to getting back in there, as well as into the lab in Walker Complex, our kinesiology anatomy lab. We have a ton of models in the anatomage table, and we're really looking forward to integrating those back into the course. But while saying that, I think we've also now come to realize that we have adapted, and we need to adapt what we've learned over the past year to find some kind of hybrid approach. I think Rebecca, Yasmin, Martin, and I, we understand that the lab space is finite. We can only fit so many people in there at a time. And for those of you who have experienced in-person learning at Brock, it's a very busy spot. It's almost full all hours of every working day. So now, again, we're trying to think about what's best for our hybrid learning approach. And we have some different research ideas to probe this question. So these will include leveraging some of the in-person resources that we have, of course. So some of the models, the cadaveric specimens, the digital resources like the anatomage table, but then also using some of these online resources that we've implemented this year. So Visible Body, the Practice Anatomy Lab. Again, we've come to realize that students are using these, and just like Luke said, it's useful to interact with this content on demand. And we're also starting to curate our own kind of, I don't know, I guess, portfolio of resources as well. So we have a lot of models in the lab, and Yasmin and Martin have been busy in the lab taking photos of these models, and we're hoping to curate a catalog that, again, students might be able to access when they're unable to get to campus or get into the lab. So these are some of the things that we've been thinking about moving forward as well. But with that, again, I noted some research, so I'll give the floor to Dr. McPherson, and she can go over some of the plans that we have for that as well.
Awesome. Okay, let me take control here. Nice. Yeah, so that's a great kind of summary about where we're thinking of going and what we're thinking about doing. And if you guys have ideas or feedback, obviously we're open to that, so just let us know. So getting a bit into the research. Oh, this isn't our slide. We're all jumbled up. I gotta go backwards. Okay, so here we are. So yeah, I think Dr. Wainman actually, he set the bar really high with his talk and all of the research that he has been able to do with a lot of the students he's been interacting with, and that I guess is where our goal is to work towards that and continue with our research. And we saw a really great talk from Indra and Kaladi, just highlighting what they've been doing for the past year and their research and kind of looking at the student experience and the volunteer experience. And based on this past year, as you can see on this slide, where we've pulled a few different papers that have been published, just looking at the effect of COVID-19 on learning this past year, or even virtual learning versus in-person learning, there's going to be a lot of information coming out. And so we're hoping to kind of, I guess, dig deeper into this in the future. And so we're going to continue to complete that study that Indra and Claudia were working on and looking at the experience of the volunteers. And next, we really want to focus a bit more on the students and what their perspectives are on the online versus in-person learning and some of the preferences that they take from learning and what's good and what's bad. And then down the line, as educators, now we're going to have a lot of experience in person as well as in teaching online and using different tools. And so it would be great, as one of our research aims, to look at how we've changed the way that we teach. And so that's kind of where we're going next year and beyond with the research. And we're hoping to kind of continue to expand in this program and maybe one day be as good as Dr. Wainman and his group. So that's where we are. And I'll pass on to our lab demonstrators, Martin and Yasmin.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Drs. Baudet and McPherson. So I guess one thing, maybe we'll just mention or summarize this with is talking about how the lab experience will, hopefully look like in the future. And I think the nice thing is these points have sort of been addressed just from our current students. So Rebecca, Luke, and Emily. So I think if we were to talk about this whole past year from two perspectives, from an educator's perspective, there are moments where one thinks about all the amount of time of pumping out this content online and how long that content will be used for. Are we going to be just using this stuff temporarily? Will we be recycling this? And from a student's perspective, will my learning be compromised? Are these resources going to help me down the line? And I think it took some time for us to actually realize that, wow, yes, the answer is these resources are going to be helpful in the future, because the benefit of putting all this stuff online is that it's always going to be there. So, I mean, that could probably be scary in other situations, but here it's actually amazing. So when we go back in person, whenever that might be, the beauty of this all is that we're still going to have that opportunity to utilize resources like Visible Body or Mastering A&P. The lab videos will still be there. So for example, if you just want to brush up on some content, whether it be a lecture video or a lab video, you can take a look, go in the lab and know exactly what you want to explore. And that really does improve the efficiency. And obviously the lab manual may be revamped a little bit more so that we can incorporate more in-person learning when that takes place. But again, that resource is there. So I think there's been a huge silver lining with all of this virtual learning, and that we're very hopeful that we'll be able to provide these as additional resources that students can use and really maximize their potential in understanding anatomy.
And I think the key thing here is that, whereas before we were thinking how to transition, that transition once again is not just going from an in-person to an online, but making it somewhat both. Having that ability to have access to those resources. And, some of the shortcomings, like some of our students have mentioned, there's that interactivity that's maybe a little bit lacking, a little bit of that community aspect that just doesn't quite get emulated in an online setting. And to be able to have that plus all of these extra resources that you could have access to, not to make it necessarily dependent on them in order for you to succeed, but to really have them to help explain and to have us continue to be accessible. Because one of the highlights was that, I think Luke mentioned, to be able to, message someone later in the evening. We may not necessarily answer it all the time, but when TAs are available and accessible and can help clarify things, we really genuinely do try our best to make sure students succeed, no matter what situation they may be in. So being able to combine all of those elements to give something a little bit more robust, a little bit more interactive, to make sure that the resources that we do end up using are utilized well and appropriately, are going to be huge for us as we move forward. And we're excited for the potential that all of these kinds of things can employ, and that we are able to employ them in the future. So I think when it comes down to it, the future looks pretty good. It's also going to be extremely busy for us, which I guess is a good thing. It'll keep us out of trouble maybe. But we are expanding, and hopefully for those of you who are still paying attention at this point, it's been a long time. We really, really want to say thank you to everyone who has been a part of this today, for joining us, for dealing with us. A big thank you to Dr. Wainman for that, really wonderful keynote. As the resident sexologist, some of that really resonated with me. So I think it's great that we are able to have speakers and that we're starting to get involved with other community partners, and we want you guys to get involved too. Some of you may be current students, and you may be interested in becoming frontline volunteers. For those of you who are current volunteers, maybe you want to get a little bit more interactivity and you're excited about the potential to add more content to be part of our future. We invite you to apply to be senior volunteers, because it's an interesting opportunity. And for those of you who thought, wow, what Claudia and Indra have been able to do and what Dr. Wayman was describing as part of the work that is done at McMaster, we are doing similar things. We are building that kind of environment. And if you think that research might be interesting, that you might want to have some of that, we so welcome you guys to reach out to us to apply to that, because we genuinely enjoy it. And I think it would be an excellent opportunity for us to continue to expand, to grow, and to provide all of those resources to students. Students are a resource. We're here for you just as much as you guys are here for us. So we do appreciate everyone. So as a big thank you to everyone who has been involved in any small capacity today, thank you for being here, for attending, for participating, for sharing your thoughts, for asking questions. For those of you who did participate and reach out to ask questions, we really appreciate everything that makes this entire program successful and interesting. On behalf of myself, Drs. Mezel, Baudet, and McPherson, without you guys, we would not be able to have this much fun. this much stress, but we wouldn't also be able to succeed as well as we could have, because we genuinely appreciate all of you for being here and for I guess pushing our buttons and pushing our boundaries and our comfort level to make sure we manage to live up to our expectations. So thank you.
See you later, everybody.
You guys have something to add?
I think Martin, that's a great way to sign off. I just reiterate what you said. It's been absolutely phenomenal to have you guys join us here today. Again, we appreciated that it's a Saturday. We would like to take a group picture for whoever might still be around, and I think we might be able to facilitate that. Again, being that this is our first inaugural event, we would like to commemorate in some form or fashion. So if you're willing, if you're out of your pajamas, we can share our videos and I think come in together mode to take a quick group picture. Martin, would you mind taking the photo?
I mean, I guess if I have to. Let me just maximize this so I can get as much of you as I possibly can in this photo. I think that about covers it, so. Hold on. Let me make sure I'm actually looking at it. Hey!
Say cheese.
I think I got it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. This was awesome.
Yes, thanks everyone for attending, for helping out. Woo.
Thank you once again to our speakers, Indra, Claudie. Thank you. My gosh, we had Emily, Rebecca, and Luke as well. Thank you so much. To our moderators. Oh God, am I going to get through all the names? Do I have to? You know who you are, and so thank you. And once again, big shout out to Dr. Wayman, if he's still around. I think I saw him pop up. Maybe not. He's done with us. Okay. Well, once again, thanks everyone. For those of you who managed to put up with us, you will have, for those of you who want it, we will be sending out emails for continuing education credit, or not continuing education. It's been a long day. The course-wide curriculum credit. So that's through Experience BrockU. So, that's a nice bonus. If you guys have any questions for any of us, you can reach out the entire anatomy team at anatomy@brocku.ca. If you have any questions about our speakers, you can use that email. We can provide the contact info or forward it along as well. If you want to reach them out directly, some of their information may have been here for any of the presenters. So that will be available as well. And once again, thank you to everyone. We're 2 minutes over time, so I think we did okay. I think we were pretty good in terms of our time management. So, all right.
Woo. Enjoy your Saturdays.
Yeah, enjoy the weekend. Thanks again, everyone. I guess that concludes it. For those who may have questions, I'll hang around for the next 10 minutes or so. But yeah, it was great seeing you guys. Enjoy the rest of the weekend and do take care.
All right, take care, guys. Thanks for doing all this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for attending.
Thank you.